Family history of our RVing. Hi, I'm Jim from RV4x40.com.
I'm Chris. Welcome to our home.
We're glad you could join us on the channel this week. We're going to cover some of our history in actually camping and RVing in general. Thought it might be useful for some folks who are considering what to do, where to go, how to do it, and just look back at some of our past and how we've done things, and maybe it'll be an illustration for you for what you might be able to do.
So as I was growing up, I have memories, a few though they may be, of camping with my family as we took a trip to Yellowstone National Park. We stayed in cabins on that trip, and so that was about the closest I got to camping. I did enjoy times with the Girl Scouts and in church camps, but again, always camping in cabins.
My camping experience was a little bit different. I was in Boy Scouts, so we did do some overnight hiking campings with pup tents and sleeping bags and that kind of thing. Went to Boy Scout camp, that was cabins, and some other places that I went for camps that were in cabins too. But that was really my background. One of the more interesting experiences I had was as a youth with a pastor from our area. Took a bunch of us out camping one weekend, and I learned that you can take a shower in the woods with a gallon bucket of water and actually have water left over. So that was a new experience, and later on I had to teach Chris that was actually possible because she didn't believe it at the time. But fast forward, and we were married. We had our oldest daughter had been born at that point, and we decided we would try tent camping. So you buy a tent, we bought sleeping bags, and I remember one camping trip we were up near Ruidoso, New Mexico, in the pine trees, and at night the wind was coming up and we could hear the wind howling down the side of the mountain, and it sounded literally like a freight train was coming down the hill at us. The roar was so loud. So it was one of the more interesting experiences we had early on with camping. You want to talk about Big Bend?
Yes, and that was an interesting experience for me because I had been not aware that we would be quite so out in the wilds, I guess, and the coyotes howling really unnerved me at night as we were in a tent, and I didn't figure that tent was going to keep me very safe from coyotes. I was about ready to move into our Bronco when Jim reassured me.
Well, yeah, I reassured him that first of all, those coyotes were probably across the Rio Grande across the Rio Grande in Mexico, because Big Bend is right on the border. And then even if they weren't, that the sound travels miles and miles in that dry desert air, and I'm sure those coyotes, even though they sounded loud, were quite far away. Of course, at the time, I had no idea where the coyotes were and how close they were, whatever they were. I didn't think they come into a camp with humans around, but didn't know that for sure. But I reassured my family, and they actually bought that story.
And we made it through the night.
We did. From there, after probably another couple of camping trips with other experiences, we decided that we would like to get something a little more upscale. And at that point in our lives, upscale was a pop-up camper, which basically is canvas-sided. And what at least what we had was, we had a Suburban to pull it, so it was an easy thing for the Suburban to pull. It could pull quite a bit more. And we bought that, and one of our first longest trips in it, we took from Corpus Christi at the time, up into Colorado and then over into Wyoming, and saw that part of the countryside, which was a great trip, a good family trip, a good time to bond with what we now had two daughters, and had a good time on that, camping in that thing. It was relatively primitive by what we do today, but we did. And one of the more memorable experiences, we were out near Jackson, Wyoming, in a campground. And in the side of a hill there was a family of skunks was living right beside the campground. And they would wander through the campground at night or sundown, whatever, looking for food, and the kids would be parading out behind mom and pop. So there was this family of a couple of adult skunks and maybe 5 or 6 babies. And so our kids were young enough, they got a real kick out of watching these things walk by. Of course, we stayed far enough away to stay away from their spray pattern if that should occur. But it was one of the more interesting experiences we had on that trip.
So we enjoyed some whitewater rafting and some horseback riding. So all in all, our camping experiences were pretty good with that pop-up.
And so a little bit later on goes by, and we decide we'd like to kind of upgrade and not rough it quite so much. And we started looking at motorhomes. And we ended up at that point with a Georgie Boy motorhome. And it was, I think, a 34-footer, but it was gas powered on a Ford chassis. So it was fairly typical of motorhomes in those days. No slides, so you were much more constrained than you are today. But we really enjoyed the fact that you could be going down the road, and Chris could go back and pop some popcorn or get me a Coke out of the refrigerator, and we had a good time camping in that. It was a really good experience. I think our longest camping trip, and certainly one of our worst camping trips ever, became known in the family as the camping trip from hell. But we were going to Branson, Missouri, and not too far out on the first day, we had a blowout in the rear tire. That's better in the rear tires than the front tires because it doesn't affect your steering and you can still safely stop. So we called road service up, they came out, and we actually carried a spare tire with that particular motorhome. They changed the tire and we go on our way. Well, before we had gone too far, we had a second tire go out. Now there's no spare, so I had to go and buy a tire to get us back on the road. Branson trip comes off, and we're heading back to Corpus Christi. And one of our constraints was our daughter was going to have some surgical procedures done, and we needed to be back in Corpus for pre-op medical appointments early the next week. And this was 4th of July weekend, too. So we're on our way back, and we have a third blowout. And so this time it's like, okay, I am fed up with these tires. I need to get this fixed before I subject my family to further potential harm. With these things are not necessarily safe landings all the time. We did come out of them all okay. So we were near Russellville, Arkansas, of all places, and there was a Michelin dealer there. So we kicked into a campground. My wife and daughter stayed behind. They were going to do laundry in the laundromat there, and I went to the tire dealer. The first problem was the dealer could not authorize a swap of that many tires, even though they were obviously failing. And he needed to talk to his district manager, who it turns out had left on a fishing trip early because it's 4th of July weekend. Well, somehow we finally got the authorization, got the tires swapped, and I noticed at the time that the Ford dealer happened to be right across the road, which is important in a minute. So now I'm heading back to the campground with 6 new tires. And a couple $1,000s poorer because it didn't cover the whole cost. In any case, we get back almost to the campground, and I realize I'm losing power. I don't have the power to run this thing I should have. It will barely run above an idle, if at that. And there's a hill into the campground, and I cannot pull it, so I call road service again. They're going to send a wrecker. And they send basically a half-ton Chevy pickup type of wrecker out to pull this thing, which was probably 22,000 pounds or something like that. And so he wasn't sure he could do anything, but between what he could pull and the little bit of power I could get just off of idle with the engine, we got it up the hill and into a campsite. So he's also a mechanic, and we start trying to figure out why this engine won't run. It runs at idle fine, it just won't produce any power. And we're starting to come to the conclusion there's something plugging up the exhaust pipe. So I turn around, and he's gone. At that point, I was not carrying any particular amount of tools with me in the RV. And so I don't know what I'm going to do next, and it turns out he had gone to get more tools and came back fairly quickly. So eventually we figure out the catalytic converter is probably plugged up, and we're going to have that replaced. And so first of all, I called that Ford dealer I'd seen, and yes, they have the converter, and yes, we can change it. But it's Friday night, and our guys are going to want to leave on time, so you need to be here by 4 so we can get that swapped out. So he and I found a way to pry the thing apart and basically shoved a screwdriver in to hold the opening, and I could get some power out of it. So now my family is back with me. We're driving down the road towards the Ford dealer. I know where it is. I also know that there's a viaduct over some railroad tracks that I have to go over, and it's fairly steep. And as we get there, we're gradually losing power again. It turns out the screwdriver we had plugged in, it was a plastic handle. The guy had shoved it in handle first, and as the handle was melting from the hot exhaust gas, the opening was closing up. So the time we get to that viaduct, we're all sitting around going, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And we crept over the top of that viaduct at maybe 2 miles an hour. And then it was downhill into the Ford dealership, and we pulled in at 3:59. And God bless those guys. They started on it, It turns out it wasn't a 1 hour job. It turned out to be almost 3 hours, but the mechanics stuck around and they kept the dealership open to get us back on the road. So we were very, very thankful about that, and we did get back to Corpus in time. But as I said, it became known as the RV trip from hell. After we had that RV, and we enjoyed it, but then things changed in life too, and basically the job that I had went away. And so part of our economizing at that point was we got rid of the RV. It was not an expense we needed to keep. And so we ended up moving to Austin and doing some other things there work-wise, and really didn't do much in the way of RVing for several years. The kids were home. I was traveling a lot, so we always had a lot of airline miles we could use. So we ended up taking vacations in a more traditional fashion, driving somewhere, usually flying somewhere. And then we did a lot of ski trips and other fun things with the family, but they didn't include RVing. So now we fast forward several years, and both kids are out of the house. They're on their own. They're adults. And we ended up owning a Dodge pickup out of all that. And so we decided it would be time to RV again, and started looking at a trailer this time, a travel trailer. Ended up with a 26-foot Mallard trailer with a single slide out. It was adequate for the two of us. There was just the two of us and our dog we had at the time. And our daughter had also decided she wanted to try camping with her family, and they had bought an ultralight that they could tow behind their Kia minivan. And that worked quite well. It was really surprising how much power that minivan had. But we were camped together a lot, and we would camp separately sometimes. So we were enjoying camping again, but I soon decided I really did not like a trailer. So with the trailer, I found that the connecting, disconnecting was just a pain. It was a lot of work. I thought it was a lot more work to do that than it was to get into a motorhome and drive off. And I have never been particularly good at backing. The pop-up, I had to back it up, but it was much easier. It was shorter. You could see over the top of it, see what was going on. And I actually could almost pick that one up at the back end of it anyway and slide it if I needed to get it in somewhere. So I was just not happy with the trailer. And so we started looking again and thinking about maybe a motorhome. So we looked around and we found a Tiffin. Again, it was a gas powered rig, 32-footer. On a Ford chassis, and we negotiated a deal. We bought that, and we sold the travel trailer and the pickup eventually and got rid of all that. And so now we're back into the business, and I really did like that a lot better. The other thing I liked, and I found out, was that Tiffin, from a customer service standpoint, is just outstanding. If I had a question about it and needed to do something, there were a few things I had to repair, and I did add an air conditioner to it. But Tiffin was very, very helpful in terms of call them up, ask them a question. They had knowledgeable people on the phone. They knew the product. They knew how it worked. They knew a lot of the answers they would have to give you. If they didn't know them, they would get them for you. So we were very impressed with Tiffin, and we enjoyed that motorhome for a couple of years. Now, however, we're at the point where we're starting to get close to my retirement. And at the time, we had about 6.5 acres of fairly rural property, and it was partially treed and partially grass kind of stuff. It had a barn, but it also had a lot of maintenance because of the size of the property and the trees and keeping things mowed. And at first, it was very, very fun to do that. I enjoyed that kind of work. And it was a great place. We had a lot of events for different people and different things. Different organizations would come out and use the property. It had its own pavilion, so it was a really, really nice layout for that kind of stuff. But it was far more than the two of us needed anyway. And we were started looking at, okay, we're going to downsize. I'm tired of spending all my time on a lawnmower. So there was a lot of maintenance work that had to be done, and I was really getting tired of that and wanting to downsize. So we started thinking about and talking about maybe going full-time in a motorhome. And I started doing a lot of work on YouTube and that kind of thing to research what I could find out about that and about the lifestyle. And the more we looked at it, the more we thought that would be a really good idea. Just downsize, sell that property, give away stuff we didn't want, but put a little bit of stuff we wanted to keep in storage, and then get something else. Well, it was pretty clear that a 32-foot motorhome was not going to be sufficient for the two of us, and by now we have two dogs, different dogs. And so we started thinking about what we would want to have, and basically the idea came that we need to go to a diesel pusher to get the size, the comfort we want to have. And I pretty well narrowed it down to Tiffin, Monaco, and Newmar as the brands I thought would be the most appropriate, kind of the best reputation for all of them, and just looking at different used machines that I could find in that category.
So we did some work and made a list of what we felt we must have in a full-time RV motorhome. And what we would like to have in our motorhomes, what might be optional. And we started going around to different places and looking and to the RV shows and dealers and trying to find exactly what we wanted.
We had the benefit, of course, at this point of having had now 2 motorhomes and a travel trailer. Never had a 5th wheel, but we did consider that in this whole process of going full time. We did look at 5th wheels extensively. What I would encourage people to do if you're at the point of just starting out is to spend time at dealerships or RV shows, but spend time in the rig and imagine yourself in that rig, maybe for even spend several hours there, imagining what it's like to get up in the morning and fix your breakfast, go use the toilets and the bathroom and facilities, and just kind of go through a day in your mind with how well that layout would work for you. And then you've got to look at storage and the other things, ease of handling, all those kind of things. As I said, we did look extensively at 5th wheels, several floor plans, and I know a lot of people like 5th wheels and they use them and they think they're great, and if they work for you, that's fantastic. But when I was looking at it, I felt that the storage was just not there by comparison to a motorhome. The underneath storage in a motorhome is significantly higher. The inside storage may be the same or even better in some 5th wheels, but the outside storage is primarily this big empty cavity under the front of the trailer. And in that, you're going to have to figure out how to get stuff stored and find it and all that kind of stuff. And sorting it out seemed to me like it would be a real hassle. So in the end, we decided we were going to stick with the motorhome. And I found one. It was a Monaco by brand up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It was owned by an American Airlines pilot. And he had a record of everything that had ever been done to that motorhome. So I had very good service records. And if you're buying a used vehicle, it's a good idea. If you can get those, it's a plus. If you can't, then you have to be a little more cautious about maybe buying something. But we went through that whole process. At the time, Chris wasn't with me. You want to explain why?
Well, I was in College Station, living over there in our motorhome, the 32-foot motorhome, and helping my daughter with her newborn baby. So I was there for several weeks, actually probably a couple months. And during this time, Jim found this motorhome in the Dallas area and sent me a lot of pictures of that home, which I was very impressed with. It had what we needed for basics, and plus a lot more. So he went ahead and bought it.
Yeah, this particular motorhome had all the must-haves and several of the like-to-haves, and so it really fit the bill. It was well maintained and seemed to be in good shape, so it was not a problem with any of that. So we put the deal together, bought that, and eventually sold the other motorhome. But in the meantime, we had 2, and that was an interesting phenomenon to have. And so we were very happy in that motorhome. We actually invested a fair amount into it. I put in some suspension upgrades and spent some money on that. We had the interior remodeled and replaced the carpet flooring with vinyl flooring, replaced most of the interior furniture. And so it was really being customized and was our home. And if we hadn't had this next event happen, we probably would still be in that motorhome. It was really met our needs well. But in January of 2019, as we were getting ready to move out and go camping, I noticed that under the driver's side front slide, that the mechanism which moves the slide in and out had dropped. The whole slide had dropped, in fact, and was digging into a piece of aluminum trim underneath of there. And it already gouged a slot that was maybe a half an inch deep, and it was going to get deeper because every time the slide went in and out, it was still gouging into that and still dropping. So had no idea what to do with that. And basically started doing some research, couldn't find anything. We'd already planned a trip to Florida, so I contacted Lazy Days in Tampa, and they said, sure, we can fix that, no problem, we know what that is. And so we arranged our schedule to spend a week or 2 weeks in that part of Florida getting this done. Headed over there, came in, they took it into the shop, and then right away, okay, we're going to have to order the parts for this, we don't have them. And so, okay, that'll be a few days for that. So we stayed in the campground, went back, and they took the motorhome back, went to put the parts in, then they came back and said, well, the factory sent us the wrong parts. And I thought that was kind of strange if the factory made the mistake or if they made a mistake in what they ordered. Couldn't run that one down. And so now they're going to have to order more parts. So we go back to the campground. And 3 or 4 days later, I go to check, and they still haven't ordered the parts that they supposedly ordered the first time and ordered wrong or whatever. and can't tell me when they're going to even order the parts. Now, in the meantime, we'd spent some time in their waiting area and talked to other people. One couple had been there over a month with a very similar story about parts were ordered, the wrong parts didn't come in, and whatever happened, they had to order more parts, and these parts were late. And so they had been there well over a month trying to get something else fixed. And so we already had requirements to be somewhere else, that we had scheduled things to be done. And I'd allowed 2 weeks for this. I thought that was plenty. And so we left without getting the slide fixed. And the short version of this very long story is that we spent most of the rest of 2019 trying to find someone who could and would fix this, including a trip to the REV factory service center in Indiana. And they had no idea what was wrong either. They just had never seen this, they claimed, and didn't know how to fix it. So by the end of 2019, we're looking at this thing is getting worse. It's not getting any better. No one can fix it. I even talked to some factory reps about it. They didn't know what was going on. And so we decided that unless we get rid of this thing, we're going to risk a catastrophic failure of the slide, and the whole motorhome is then worthless and it's scrap parts. And so we decided we were going to have to upgrade to something else. And at this point, I clearly ruled out Monaco as a replacement, but Tiffin and Newmar were still on our radar. And we started looking and found actually a couple of different ones to look at. And we found this particular motorhome at Motorhome Specialist in Alvarado. And we went in, looked at it, and it had pretty much the same layout and features and benefits that we wanted from the Monaco, and so it fit the bill. A couple of things we liked better, maybe one or two things we didn't like as well. It definitely had more storage than the Monaco had underneath, especially, and probably up in the top as well. Problem was, of course, the storage was all arranged differently, so everything that we've become accustomed to, we had to rearrange when we packed this one out. But we did cut the deal. We traded in the other motorhome. I disclosed to them that there's a slide problem I've not been able to get fixed. Didn't want to have them come back with somebody about that. And of course, I don't know if they fixed it like they said they would, or if they just sold it as is, which may be the case. In any event, we have been very happy with the Tiffin. However, as with all stories, there's a twist to this one. And what happened next?
Well, we developed a leak in the slide, in fact, just right up over my head, that anytime it rained, we would have to pull the slide in. And so obviously this was not something we wanted to have going on. So Jim got to work again trying to figure out how this was going to be able to be fixed, whether he could do it or if we would need to have someone else do it.
My first reaction, of course, is, oh no, another slide problem. And so what do we do with this one? Well, I called the local repair guys that I use in the Austin area, and they came out and looked at the slide and said, well, there's a bad spot in the roof covering and we need to fix that. So okay, they fixed that, and that was good that they fixed it. It was there, no doubt about that. But next time it rained, it didn't fix the leak problem, so we still have this problem. So I called Tiffin and explained to him what was going on, and the guy knew exactly what the problem was. And basically he walked me through what it would take to fix it. And bottom line is the slide itself, the top of it is not as strong as it should have been, and it tends to sag, and when it sags, the water runs in instead of running out and gets up against the seam and drifts down. So they knew all about that and told me what it would take to fix it, and he went through that with me, and I said, that sounds like it's a lot more than I can probably easily do myself. Maybe I can bring it to the factory and you guys can do it. And he said that's probably a good idea. Most people do that. And so we arranged to go to the factory service center in January, put it off a couple of times for other things, and we just pulled the slide in when it rained to make sure we didn't get any damage from the water coming in. And so in January of this year, we went to Red Bay, Alabama, where the factory is, and checked in, and it's a first come, first serve kind of thing. They don't take advance appointments. And so we went into the queue, and then 2 or 3 days later we got in, and it was about 3 hours in the shop, and what they really did was raise that center section of the slide, prop it up where it's supposed to be, and literally put a brace in place down to the kitchen countertops that hold it up, and it's been fine ever since. We've been through a couple of really severe rainstorms with it out and no leaks. And the really good news about this, and the reason that I think Tiffin is just a first-class quality outfit, is because it was really fundamentally a design issue with this particular generation of slide. They comped the repair. They did not charge us for it at all. I had them lubricate a different slide. It was making a lot of noise, and they took care of that for me. And it was, I think the whole bill was $39 for getting all this done. So it was $30 for the lubrication, like a $9 fee for shop supplies or whatever. So we were very, very happy with that. We've been very happy with this motorhome. And I hope that you find some information in this that might be useful.
Yes, we hope to be in this home for a long time and are definitely enjoying it. And we still are able to travel and do whatever we want to do and visit family as we want to do that. And so we're enjoying our full-time RVing life.
It's a great lifestyle. I would, if you're considering it, it's not for everybody. I know some folks don't like being on the road like that. They don't like being isolated from maybe family and friends back home as much. But it is what it is, and we enjoy it. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. That would help us out. And then there's a bell icon. If you click on that, you'll be notified when we post a new video. So in the meantime, we hope to see you on the highways and byways of America, and you have a good day.